but I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and my mom is one of 14. And so I come from a very, very, very large family. And we're definitely of the perspective that it takes a village. And so people come to my home and they're like, how do you not have children? Your home is so child friendly. And I'm like, well, I have a huge family and there are always children here. And I always have someone's child with me for an extended period of time. And so people just like, when they actually come to my house, they really can't believe I don't have kids. So.
Well, sounds like you already raised 5.
Yeah. That's like a Chris Rock joke. He says in large families that the eldest 2 raise all the others. And I have to say, my parents are awesome, but my sister and I definitely took the lead on the younger 4. So like, at least in our minds, my parents were obviously the bosses of everything, but in our minds, we felt the responsibility.
So I tell you what, I know we've got limited time and this is the last thing you do before bed. Should we call that the start of the show?
Okay. Sounds
Hi
good.
there, esteemed audience. Welcome to an episode of Middle Grade Ninja. My guest is Tina Wells, author of the newly released Honest June, which just went wide. I know it's been exclusive with Target for 3 months already, and we're going to talk a bit about that as well. But so you're the oldest of 6 kids. Does that responsibility for your younger siblings, do you think that has something to do with your going on to found your first company, Buzz Marketing, at age 16?
I don't know. Yes and no. My mom often says that I'm exactly the same person today that I was at 3 years old. So I don't know for better or worse what that means, but in her mind, she says I'm exactly who I've always been. So I think being the oldest of 6 made me use all the resources I had available to do what I needed to do at that age. And I wanted to be a fashion writer and I love products. And my first job was as a product reviewer, which led to marketing, which led to the agency. And so it definitely played a part, I think.
At what point does Buzz Marketing go from being that fun thing you do to, oh, this is the thing?
I got my degree in journalism, and then post journalism, I realized I was getting into business and didn't understand the fundamentals of business. And so I ended up going to Wharton and doing a program they had way back in the day called Wharton Programs for Working Professionals. And then after I was in the program, I met a professor and ended up working for him and teaching there. And then I took over as academic director of a program called Leadership in the Business World for about 6 years. And so I think that I often say the first 20 years of my career were like gut instinct and I just rolled with it. And it's only in the last few years that I think I've become really, really intentional around what I want to do and how I want to show up. But I always just thought I was a kid who landed something really interesting and unique. And I kind of just went with it. I was what I was doing, there wasn't a name for it. I was doing influencer marketing before we all talked about influencer marketing as we do now. And, I was, researching millennials before we all talked about millennials the way we do now. And so I was fortunate to be on the cusp, but also that meant that people didn't always understand what I was doing at the time,
Well, it's the problem with being a trailblazer, right? You have to show them all. Now, of course, everybody is following in your wake and saying, of course, this makes why wouldn't you do this?
Yeah, that's the story. I do think that that's a through line in my career, doing things that haven't been done before and dealing with the we don't get it and then we do it and then other people come and execute it much better maybe, but I like it. I think sometimes I see a way that something can be done, and I've been fortunate enough to have partners that go along with me, and I think we'll talk later more about Target, but I'm very fortunate to have partners who see the vision and we try new things.
And I know you were a big reader as a child, right?
Oh yeah. My dad used to take all 6 of us to the library once a week over the summer, and I would get out as many books as I could for that week. And so on a good week, I was reading a book a day. But I was reading like Fear Street. Do you remember Fear Street? I loved Fear Street. Sweet Valley High, Sweet Valley Twins, whatever was in that genre, it would just have to be able to power through a book a day.
A book a day. And I know you read about still a book a week, maybe a little bit more sometimes now.
Yes, I do. I just finished Single Black Female yesterday, and today I started Lucky, which is Reese Witherspoon's like book of the month. And so, and also thank goodness for Audible and South Jersey living. That means I'm kind of always in need of content, and there's always a book I'm reading, and sometimes I'm listening to a book and then reading, a totally separate book as well.
That's going to be a big theme of our conversation, because just as I looked at your list of accomplishments, it exhausted me. I'm like, where's the time in the day? So I want to know how you manage your time and how you're able to work and all the things you do. And I also know that you're very big on a work-life balance and achieving that. And I want to know how you're pulling that off while accomplishing still as much as you want to do. So maybe the best place to start is, let's start with Honest June and talk about the new book, and then we'll go into your writing process and how that came to be. But my promise to you and to everyone who would ever come on the show is I will never make you sit through me summarizing your book. How painful. So what does esteemed audience need to know about Honest June?
I always have June very close to me. Beautiful book. So Honest June is about a girl, a tween, a middle schooler who can't tell a lie. She is blessed with the gift to always tell the truth by a mystery fairy godmother. And now she has to figure out how she can survive middle school without her little white lies or kind of lies of omission that she was used to telling to help her keep everybody in her life happy. And so it's really a theme of, how do I stay true to myself? How do I tell the truth, knowing that my truth might hurt other people? And I think when I think about tweens today, I think about all the pressure. June's under a lot of pressure from her parents, who are very successful, to go to a certain school and do a certain thing. And so it's about how you also come into your own, while also trying to make your parents happy. So I think, it's got a lot of magic in it, which is new for me, just kind of experimenting with that. But I've gotten some really good early reviews from my young readers, which I love. And it's just meant to be a lot of fun.
Well, a question I'm fond of asking is, who is the ideal reader for this story? And I always imagine that you've got some vague notion of who's in mind. When I say you, I mean other authors. You, who have been finding exact people to market to for years and years, I imagine you know exactly who your reader is for this story. Who is it? How do you identify them?
Absolutely. So the answer is tweens, right, in general. But let me then dig down to like, why June, why this moment? I started thinking about just the anxiety that tweens are under, the pressure that they're under. I think it's, especially post-pandemic, more than ever, right? We see how anxious life is making tweens. And then I look for common themes, and like, is this something that's bubbling up for the kids that are closest to me? Do I see patterns in society showing that it's affecting, others who aren't in just my group of friends, right? I think sometimes we make a mistake of thinking like, well, this is happening to my friends, so it must be happening to everyone else, without going a little bit wider. So I spent a lot of time just researching, is this an issue? Like, do kids feel this pressure? We start to, through the series, explore June having panic attacks and really, really feeling anxious and feeling that pressure. And so that's really what I wanted to explore as almost a sub-theme, is what is the anxiety or pressure of our culture? And this, for me, I started seeing this years ago with like the schedule that tweens keep. I always had a sport after school, but I didn't feel like I had a schedule in a way, that I felt very scheduled. And so I do spend a lot of time when I'm working on a series, really observing what's happening in culture. My readers always have parents attached to them. I think about, how will these themes resonate for those parents? Is there a teachable lesson here? And what I will say about Honest June is, I think it's probably the work I've done that will most appeal to tween boys as well. I know that tween boys liked Mackenzie Blue, my first series. I know I have some tween boy readers for the Zee Files, but I think June will probably have kind of the biggest boy audience as well.
What do you think that will attract them to Honest June that maybe wouldn't attract them to the Zee Files?
I think the Zee Files, you find a lot of girl drama and like living with friends, and Z is in her head a lot. June as well. I would say June even more, but I think the little bit of magic, I think June's, one of her best friends is Lee, who lives next door. And she's also a little bit younger. So she's just entering middle school. So I think some of the themes that come out with Z, that it's more fashion focused or more living away at boarding school. Here you have someone who is like integrated in her family, with her parents, and just starting middle school, and it being a little bit more about the collective group of friends. And then both series focus on that. I just think sometimes Z skews a little bit more towards a female reader.
And then in this book, without giving too much away, we're dealing obviously with honesty right there from the title. And June is a person who likes to make people happy. And she's fine with doing that, even if that means not telling people the whole truth, but in a good way. And as I read that, I thought, well, that doesn't sound entirely wrong. What would you say is the right amount, right balance of being honest and not telling people the whole truth, or even maybe little innocent lies meant to be just the most helpful, kindest lies imaginable, or is honesty always the best policy? Where do you fall?
I think it's with June, I see that she tells the truth to her own detriment, right? Where there are moments where if she told her mom, hey, I don't really like how you're dressing me, that's not really my style, maybe her mom would come to understand. And without giving too much away, when June does start to tell the truth, people are way more accepting of her and accepting of her truth than she thinks they will be. So much of what happens in June's life is really in her head. And, we go through these long internal conversations of how she plays things out. Like, if I don't get this grade on this homework assignment, I'm never going to college and I will end up in this place in my life. Like, we kind of play that all the way out. And so I think for June, she feels for some reason that if she were to tell the truth, it would cost her something. And, I hate that she does that to her detriment, and also because she's not used to it, when she does, sometimes it just comes out in not the right way, or she doesn't know how to deliver it right. She's still working on how she works through what she's really feeling. And so I say, for me, it's like honesty is the best policy, but that's, as you've grown and realize I think I've had to learn how to deliver certain things, and I think for June, she's just like, well, I think what I have to say is like a little too hurtful, so I just shouldn't say it, versus thinking through what's the best way to communicate this.
Gotcha. So be honest, but not brutally so. Am I hearing that right?
I think that be honest, and I would say don't withhold the truth to your own detriment.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then I know that there's already, you've got 2 sequels coming, but you've already announced that Honest June, The Show Must Go On, is going to be out, August 30th, 2022, exclusive through Target again. Is that right?
It will have an exclusive window through Target again, yes.
So 3 books are planned at the moment. Do you have plans to take it beyond that, or is it going to be a trilogy and then you're on to something else?
We've been discussing it, and I always say, like, I just finished my outline for the 3rd book, and so I think that we'll see how it goes, but there's definitely an opportunity to go beyond 3. And when I started, I wasn't sure, but as it happens, I sit with characters and I really develop a love for those characters and where the story can go. And with Z, like, I've been writing, I think I'm on was 5 in the original. I'm on my 10th story now for 11, because I've already done book 6, like the outline for book 6. And so I'm on my 11th story for Z as she's evolving. And so I think it's where the character can go, and ultimately what the readers are looking for. So the readers will dictate if there's a book 4 for sure.
So how do you know what the readers are looking for? You have conversations with them, you read reviews?
I do. I remember when I did my first book ever, which was Mackenzie Blue. And Mackenzie had Gmail, which I had access to. And so getting that insight from readers, at that point I'd had a marketing agency. I was a researcher for a long time. I'd never had such honest feedback as I had from readers writing to a character and talking to that character about their life and what was really going on. And now, through Instagram and social media, my readers write to me directly. They send me photos of them reading the book. They send me comments about how they feel about the book. I have some readers who have their own book clubs. They're tween girls who have their own book clubs. And, I have readers who create reels about the books. And so I think just for me, having that one-on-one connection where they're telling me what they think or how this is important for them in their life is so special, and I'm so grateful to social for doing that, because when I first started writing, there weren't those direct, safe ways of having those conversations all the time with readers. When I used to go and do signings or go to schools, I would get that. But just, the other day, someone sent me a reel they had done, or a mom who says, this is what my daughter is reading right now. And I see, Honest June, on the table, she's, finishing up her homework and there's Honest June. I love seeing those moments, but readers do tell me what they like about the characters. And I'm always happy when it's, something or a point I really worked really hard to bring home, some of these ideas, and having a reader say, this is what really resonated with me, lets me know I'm kind of at least on the right path.
So for all of your readers and fans who are watching or listening, if they were to reach out to you with an idea for what they'd like to see happen to their favorite characters, is that something that you take into consideration or no?
I always want to hear what my readers think, and it depends on where I'm at in the series. Like there's some really interesting things coming to the Zee Files in the next 2 books, so I can't wait to hear what the readers think about that. My current book in that series, A Very Malibu Vacay, Zee's gone back to California, so now we have like people from the first cast with people from the second, and so just hearing that feedback is great. But I always want to hear what my readers think. I think, first of all, I'm a researcher at heart, right? That's really how I grew up. That was my first love, my first career. So I always want to know what my customer, my reader is thinking. That's just how I'm programmed. But even more so, DM me, send me, I want to know what you're thinking. If it's engaging enough and you're engaging with it, I want to know.
Well, you heard it here. Listening audience, reach out to Tina Wells and let her know your thoughts, or just say hi and say we love your book, and then make sure you also leave a review on whatever platform of your choice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit nitty-gritty then. That's where this show lives, is in the weeds. So when you're embarking on a new series or you've got an idea for something, what do you start with? How far in advance do you plan? Do you take it for granted that Honest June will have 2 more books, or do you wait until you get confirmation and then start planning, or you just take it 1 book at a time? How do you get going?
Yeah, so I think start with what the big idea is going to be. What's the big concept that I'm trying to bring to life? And then I take sometimes up to a year just to work through those ideas. What is culture? What's happening in culture, just what's happening. Is this a trend? Is it going to be over by the time we get a book out? Because how long sometimes it takes to get books out. Will this still be happening? And one of the things I love about writing for tweens, which is why I always say I don't know if I'll write for any other demo but middle grade, is that there are some common themes that I think no matter your age, if you are a middle grade reader, it's a life stage that you're going to go through, right? And so there is what happens when you get to middle school. There is what happens when you have your first crush, right? Like all of these things are typical middle grade behavior. So I know that I will build that in as building blocks. And then I think one of the things I'm known for is really trying to, speak to at-risk readers and having moments that they respond to that gets them hooked on the book, right? And so whether it's the art style or the text messages in the book, or with Zee, it's always her secret diary entries. It's like, what's the hook? And then I dive into who the cast is and what makes the cast unique. With June, it's the first time an Honest June that I've gone with an all Black cast. And that was really important to me to really dive in to this diverse story. And I really believe that all readers benefit from diverse stories. And I think that June has, to hear that June is like Ella Enchanted meets Dork Diaries, I was so grateful. And so, I couldn't believe that comparison, but it really brings home the idea that this is a book that's really for all young readers who enjoy those type of books. And so that's why it takes me about a year to really bring this all together. And then I go into Pinterest boards. I go into planning every detail of what each of the characters look like, how they approach things, what they would do in certain situations. I map all of that out. I map out where they live. With June, I created this fictitious town, Featherston Creek, and what happens in there. And then I dive into, now that I have the characters and the places and the things that are happening, how many books do I think we need to make this work? And with June, Penguin was so gracious to agree to the first 3, and then we'll see what happens. With Zee, we got picked up for 4, then got an order earlier this year for 2 more. And so we know that there will be 6. And I think we go from there. And then, now I'm at the place of thinking, and I have a new series coming next year called The Stitch Click. And the idea is I came up with this idea years ago about 5 girls who are really different from very different backgrounds who meet in a fashion class. And it's about this budding friendship from really 5 very, very different girls. And that took a lot of setup, and so my process is long. There's some, Honest June was a concept I first wrote around the time I worked on Zee back in 2007, and so sometimes it takes a long time, but then when I get into it, it's probably about a year, and then working through, the first book.
So when you're in, we got so many questions on the back of that, but I'll contain myself. If you have an idea, 5 years ago for the Stitch Club, and you're outlining, you're trying to figure out where the market's gonna go. How are you certain that that's still going to be relevant when it finally does come out? I assume at first you're starting with just what is the story that I want to tell? How do I express myself as an artist? What kind of specific things do you do without giving away too many of your trade secrets? What kind of specific things do you go to? Yes, not only will I love telling this story, but it will be relevant. I can confirm beyond just my own thoughts on what I think will happen, and know that yes, with some degree of certainty, as certain as you can be, that this will be a thing.
Yeah, I think that really, I think you point to me leaning into my background of 20 plus years in marketing, right? And I think I was so used to the sell through of ideas that weren't my own, right? So whether I'm selling you a laptop or the new TV show, it was always, what's the message that's going to make sense for the times that we're in? And that's just probably the secret sauce of a lot of what I do, is that I'm always thinking about that. I don't approach the process like I'm the best writer ever and I have the best idea ever. It's all just, I'm doing a read of what's going to work. And even with material or ideas, like the big idea that was maybe 10 plus years old, it's like when you start to bring it to fruition, you then start to say, well, what's going to make this really resonate in the times we're living in? And so I do believe there are universal themes, like I said earlier, that tweens and that go with the life stage of what tween really means. And I was studying tween, from day one. I had a massive CPG or consumer packaged good client that wanted me to start to explain the tween consumer. And so that was really my area of expertise, understanding millennials and then understanding Gen Z. And so this is the world I live in. I'm constantly doing that. But I still believe that there are themes that, whether I was a tween, I was a tween 30 years ago. I can't even believe I can say that now. But I was a tween 30 years ago. There are things I went through when I read Ramona, and thank goodness for, those girls who got me through my tween and teen years. And I think that those themes still resonate to girls today. I'm watching my niece go through this life stage and I'm like, wow, some things never change. It's just how we deliver them and what we talk about. That's what's changing.
I love my questions. Can you take 20 years of incredible experience and just distill that down to this one secret and give it to me? So, And then, well, let's go back just a little bit. So you're already tremendously successful. You've got your company going. You could go on and do marketing forever. What was it that pivoted you and said, hey, you know what? I think I want to start writing for tweens. And eventually, it sounds like you've come back around to fashion as well. But what was that impetus?
I loved middle grade. I loved when I did Mackenzie Blue. It was really when my agency was really taking off, and I had to be so focused on that work. And when I sold the audio rights a couple of years ago to Audible, I felt like I was given a second chance to get into that. And I think as a marketer, content started to become more and more important to the work I was doing, right? So it went to branded content, and branded content and entertainment was something I was doing, and I was quite successful at it. I worked with Oprah Winfrey Network on the Super Soul 100. We created these massive social moments, and I realized I liked doing that thing more than some of the marketing, because I felt like I was on the activation side, right? It wasn't just the insight side, and I love the insights portion, but then I want to take all of that data and all of that information I have and do something with it. And so that's really what inspired me to create Relevant Media. Was I want to make stuff with the information I have. And we talk about the lack of diversity in middle grade. Why not be part of a solution, right? There are going to be many, many writers who come into this space who become part of that solution, but why not, throw my hat in the ring too and say, I want to be part of that solution. But content's just a really interesting space, and I think it's only getting better. And I think when someone tells you that something is dead or dying, what's been so fascinating to watch is how it just gets better, right? So, do you remember years ago when everybody thought TV was dead? And now you've got, I don't know if you saw, we won't say when we're recording, right? But like the tribute to Norman Lear, and it just makes you see like all of these Hollywood stars who are doing TV, right? TV's never been better. I can't think of another time when I've enjoyed TV more. Books, podcasts, like there's so many pieces of, areas and content that are really exciting, what we're doing with audio content. And so just felt for me personally, like content was a space that was really exciting, and I could bring a unique perspective, having had a career in marketing, into, working in content.
Gotcha. And then I know that Relevant focuses on authentic representation. So what is authentic representation, and how do you know when you've achieved it?
Yeah, I think that there is not one story that is the story, right, of how I will say like young Black children experience life, right? There are many different ways that a young Black child might experience life. Me growing up with 5 younger siblings is a different experience, right? And what I want to do through the characters is make sure that I'm bringing just different perspectives to middle grade. And I think you'll see a lot of that. I won't give too much away with the Stitch Click. It will be my project where I'm like pushing boundaries the most, because I really do think that as I talk about representation, I think a big part of it was focused on diversity and really driving, racial and ethnic diversity. But I think you'll see with the Stitch Click, we're really diving into family structure, showing different types of families, and really wanting, I like, my goal is that any tween will pick up a book and say, this reminds me of me or my friend, or I am understanding a perspective that I maybe didn't consider or didn't think about before. And so that's what I love to do. It's just really thinking, what's the moment, and my characters, it's just given my life experience or what I've seen or what I see through my niece or what I see through other children who are close to me. What's a perspective that I think I can offer that might be a little different than what else, the other perspectives available.
And then I know you're getting a little bit into television as well. Are we able to talk about that at all?
It's going. That's what we say. But I just learned this is the very LA, a very Hollywood way to say, yeah, we've got some movement, and it's really exciting. And I am hoping to do what's best for the material and what's best for the readers. And it's exciting. And I think there'll be a lot more to tell over the next few months.
Gotcha. So I deduce from that you are sitting on amazing, incredible news that as soon as it breaks, I will be celebrating for you, but we can't know it yet tonight. Fair enough.
Very good.
So I know that you've got writing partners that you work with. Do I have there? How many people are involved with you directly in producing a book like Honest June?
So with June, I was really, really lucky to bring on my collaborator from the Zee Files. And so we were able to do that together. So in total, we have now collaborated on 9 books. And then with my new series, she was tapped out. And so I found an amazing new writer. A lot of times I do work with first-time middle grade writers. I like bringing that freshness of perspective and writing style to the space. And even with that, I still have a lot on my plate when it comes to writing and editing. And, I thought, oh, it's so easy to do a book. It's the hardest thing I think you'll ever do because you're never done. And there's so many different passes. And once you get through the writing, there are art approvals and there's so many layers to the process. And so I think I really look for, collaborators who have a unique position, whether it comes to style. The Stitch Click, the newest project, needed someone who could write a really fast-paced style. And so I knew I had to find someone who had written for magazines for that project. And specifically, I was hoping to find someone who had written for magazines with younger readers. And I found someone fantastic. And so then we start to talk about what works for tween, right? And that's where I love to bring that out of like, okay, these are the rules as I've defined them of how we're going to write for tweens. But it's a really fun, really collaborative process. Lots of Google Docs, lots of me writing, are we sure tweens say this? Are we sure tweens sound like this? I think I'm always programmed to say, how do I not sound like I'm a 40-year-old writing for tweens? Like there's a lot of self-editing.
How do you do that?
It's a really collaborative process.
Gotcha. Do you have like beta readers or tweens that you bring in to give you feedback on that? Or?
It's funny. I posted to Instagram a couple of weeks ago. I had to ask my niece a question. I was doing another read through. I forget which series. I guess I'm working in 3 different series right now. But I asked her something about dating and like, would this really happen on WhatsApp? And she wrote me this really cheeky, really funny response where she's like, ma'am, are you seriously asking me this? But I often go to Phoebe and say, can you just like tell me, is this right? And she'll definitely let me know. But it's always a really funny exchange where I'm like, am I like, is this accurate? And she's like, oh my gosh, Tina, you're so embarrassing. Yeah. Or else she'll just say, you're just so embarrassing. Like I'll get that feedback.
Yeah, but it's not like a regular aunt coming in to ask you about your life. You've got purpose. This is going to help other readers out there. So
yeah, but like,
she has.
She'll even say, oh, I saw someone with your book at school. So embarrassing. And I'm like, some people would actually think that that's cool, but she's like, it's so embarrassing.
5-10 years from now, she's going to be on a podcast talking about what an inspiration you were and how amazing the experience that was.
Right now, I'm just embarrassing. And she told me, she was like, the real issue is if I don't like your book, how am I going to be able to tell you that? And I'm like, you can't tell me exactly how you feel about everything, but it's just hilarious. She'll say, oh, saw someone reading your book, as if it's the worst thing ever.
So, and I'm watching our time because I know we don't have much of it. And I want to make sure I get all the good information I can possibly bring forth. You go back and forth with your writing partners, and then you've got editors that get involved. I assume some folks at Penguin have some things to say. Yeah. So, how many passes are you looking at for each book, and how many different people are sounding off and getting involved?
Anywhere from 2 to 4 passes, but I think the big thing for both of my projects and Stitch Click, well, actually all of my projects are, they all have sensitivity readers engaged, right? Because there are sensitive themes and I like to push the envelope about what I want to talk to tweens about, which means we have to bring in a lot of the professionals to make sure. With, for example, in the Zee Files, I knew when I was going to age her up that one of the things I wanted to explore was Zee, leaning towards a diagnosis of having ADHD. And so I really wanted to go through that process. And also Zee in therapy, you know, she's a California girl who's moved to the Cotswolds. She, you know, is at boarding school in a totally different culture. And it's all about how she's adjusting to that. And so you add in that layer of, you know, am I writing, am I telling the story the right way? And, you know, some of the notes I'm most proud of and moments in my career is when a sensitivity writer comes back and says, you guys have done a really good, like, this is really well executed. This is well thought out. And that makes me really happy. You know, we put a lot of time and effort into thinking through, and I do, how I'm going to tell a story, how I'm going to make it resonate for a tween. I think that with tweens, I really want them to embrace those parts of their personalities that make them different. I think the idea that we need to conform is what's so unfortunate about that life stage for me, right? We realize now as adults, it's those things that we were made fun of for, or our quirks, that actually become the things that we're known for, right? Or that we do best. And if we had allowed ourselves as tweens to kind of buy into the fact that being different was bad, where would we be now, right? So the idea for me is I always want to bring those things to light to say, you know, well, June might have this issue, but it's okay, you know, if she feels anxious or has anxiety. What's important is that June learns how to work through her anxiety, right? That she gets the tools, that she figures out what she likes, what's causing her to be anxious, which is, I'm trying to be perfect for other people and I'm not in my own truth, which is maybe I don't want to go to law school. Maybe I want to be a writer or do these other things. And so that's my goal, I think, with all of the projects, is to say, it's okay to show up as your unique self and to be who you are and to be celebrated for what makes you unique. And in doing that, sometimes we get into really sensitive topics. And so that's what causes, you know, the need to get a lot of other people involved to make sure that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is what people see and that it's resonating.
Well, that sounds like an incredibly responsible way to go about that, and make sure that this is just further act proof of why you are who you are. That makes sense. So, Target exclusivity deals don't just fall out of the sky. I know we're coming right up here on the end of our time, but we got to talk a little bit about this. How do you have a marketing team with you, or is it Tina Wells out in front? You're personally calling up Target to make this happen. How does that come about?
I was really fortunate to get to the right person and have a conversation and still in that initial conversation, I was really thoughtful about how I was going to re-engage with the opportunity. And I also wanted to be really thoughtful, like, was I in a position, because when I had done Mackenzie Blue, I almost treated it like a client of the agency and then went back to agency work. And I always felt, you know, I don't ever have regrets in life, but I will say at that time, I thought, I wish I'd given more time and energy to this thing, because I loved, you know, writing for middle grade readers so much and just creating these concepts. And so the opportunity presented itself and I said, here's what I want to do. Here's my perspective. You know, I do come from a background in marketing. Here's what I think is missing. You know, middle grade fiction, we've got less than 10% of protagonists who are, you know, children of color. Well, what can we do to fix that? I think everybody wants to really think about that. And I think it's important to know that, you know, we were engaging on this topic a few years ago, you know, so it wasn't when it became, you know, popular to have this conversation. We really started having this conversation over 2 years ago. And we're really thoughtful about how to bring it to life. And what I will say, I think we talked about this in the beginning, is sometimes you have ideas or visions and it just doesn't resonate with a traditional style of doing things. And I think that how the Zee Files came to life was really solution-based, because doors were kind of being closed where it's like, well, you can't do that. We can't do that. That's not going to work. We need it out faster, you know, and we got down to who can deliver what we need the way we need it. And that's how we ended up in the type of deal we did. And, you know, still working through what's the best way to do it. Do we need a long exclusivity period? Do we need a shorter exclusivity period? What does that look like? But, you know, I'm very grateful to Target for the shelf space, for, you know, being in the weekly ad. You know, I just opened this week's ad and there's Honest June on page 2, you know, that's seen by over 40 million people. And so, you know, that amount of presence for me, for my name, you know, in the Zee Files launched we had the back cover of that week's circular. And so it's just been a really great partnership. But to go in stores, Mackenzie Blue couldn't get into Target. It wasn't big enough. And we were selling crazy, like crazy, and still couldn't get there. And so to see, I have 5 books in stores right now across 2 different series and a product as well, is just awesome. But they're very committed to, both the idea of creating diversity in middle grade and creating, I think, diversity among their small business partnerships. We see a lot and you hear a lot from what they're doing, but as a person who's on the other side, I have 12 books that will be at Target in some way and some sort of exclusive from now over the next 2 years. And so it's just been a really great partnership for me, but really grateful for the brand building, I think, around my name and, around a few different projects.
And then once that tremendous TV news that you're sitting on that you can't tell me that happens, it's gonna be Tina Wells' world, and the rest of us are just living in it.
Let's hope that's a 2022 goal. Let's hope.
The esteemed audience knows I have to ask, because I ask everybody that comes on this show. Tina Wells, have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost?
Ooh. Think about this.
Let the record show that is not a no.
I've seen some crazy things. So I'm trying to think if that's a no. I would say that's a no to both.
Oh, okay.
But it was a long no. I really did have to think about this though.
Well, one of the crazy things you saw was that like the Loch Ness Monster or the Bigfoot. Don't hold out on me if you've got something like that. Fair enough. And then I know that we've come here to the end of our time. I tried to talk as fast as I could to make sure we got it covered. What a fantastic conversation. What a wonderful bit of content for everyone to enjoy. And you're going to keep publishing. So hopefully come back and we'll do this again sometime.
Love it. I would absolutely love it.
For tonight, my final question is always some variation of, if you could go back to yourself at the start of your career, middle of your career, wherever would have been useful to you, and given yourself some advice that would have made a difference for you and might make a difference to make easier the paths for everyone who's watching or listening to us right now, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I probably would have said, you can relax a little and you can chill out a bit. I think I was like so pent up in my 20s and just like, I got to crush it, and didn't really take time to like go on vacation, enjoy life. And that relaxation came like 10 plus years into my career. So I think I would have took it down a notch maybe.
Where can esteemed audience find you online? Probably on social media, all that good stuff.
At tinawells.com. And I'm on Instagram as tinawells_. I'm on Twitter, but you'll find it all at tinawells.com.
And as always, esteemed audience, head to middlegradeninja.com for thousands of interviews with editors, literary agents, authors, publishing professionals of all stripes, all the world's best people at middlegradeninja.com. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. It is free. You can get it for free or enjoy it as an audiobook for money. Also well worth your time. And as always, God willing and I'm alive, I'll see you next week.